Hello, welcome to episode 11, season 4 of Hashtag Psychotherapy Unfolds. As you know, I'm your host, Mark Fielding, psychotherapist and relationship counsellor. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing return guest, actor Keira O'Connor. As our listeners may remember, Keira kindly came on with the cast of Joe's latest film, I Miss You, which was episode 8, I think, of season 4. Today, Keira will be speaking of her lived experience with ADHD. Now, this is a really, really important area, and I'm quite conscious that we've only ever covered it once on the show, and that was way back in season 1. So I really feel that we have not given it the attention that it deserves. So hopefully we can correct that now with talking to Keira. And I think going forward, in terms of the show, I really want to kind of interview guests with lived experience around neurodiversity. And that's something we've really not given enough attention to on the show. So going forwards, I'm going to really, really try and correct that. But just for the meantime, thank you so much for coming on, Kieran. Really nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And maybe we could kick off. Just could you tell our listeners a little bit around your journey, maybe with ADHD? Well, what's been your journey with it?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, I'm a late. I got diagnosed late in life, so maybe only around, I think it was maybe 4 years ago. Because growing up, it wasn't really talked about. Not many people in my family knew much about ADHD. And I actually started researching it because my boyfriend at the time was studying psychology, and the area that he was doing was ADHD. And he was like, wow, that sounds like my girlfriend. So I did some more research into it, and I went to my GP, and I asked to see a psychiatrist. And this isn't a great story because she said, I'm not actually allowed to say this, but you don't have ADHD. And I was like, oh, okay, but can I still see a professional? Can I please see a psychiatrist?
Yeah.
Like, okay, fine. And then she sent me to a fake psychiatrist. Like the referral wasn't real. So that really took the confidence out for me, because I was already quite nervous to see someone about it.
Yeah.
And then so after that, it took me about another 2 years to actually get the confidence up again to see someone about it again. And then I saw a different GP, and I got referred to around 4 different psychiatrists because no one was accepting any more new clients, new patients. And then finally, I got booked in for one. I had a 10-month wait. The appointment was like $500, I think, and I needed 2 appointments.
Wow.
But finally, after all that time, I got diagnosed, and it felt like such a weight off my shoulders. And I kind of got the diagnosis for myself. This is the first time publicly I'm telling people about it. Only my close friends and family know about my diagnosis. And I wanted it for myself because I knew something wasn't, quite normal in my brain. My brain didn't work the way that everyone else's did, and I didn't know why.
Yeah.
That really impacted my mental health throughout my childhood and teenage years. So having that diagnosis was such a weight lifted off my shoulders.
Yeah, and goodness me, I mean, in terms of the fake psychiatrist, and I mean, what a terrible experience, because I mean, as you say, it's such a big deal, isn't it? I mean, to reach out to, a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, and you're looking for a diagnosis of something that you think you've got, it's a massive deal, isn't it? I mean, perhaps it's a bigger deal for people than maybe it should be, but there's still so much stigma, isn't there, over mental health and everything. And then to be met with that negative experience, so that set you back for another 2 years. And then 2 years later, you kind of entered into, looking for a diagnosis. And the late diagnosis, and also the waiting times for diagnosis, it sounds as though it's really similar in Australia to the UK. I mean, it is, people have to wait for a ridiculous amount of time, to get diagnosed. I mean, looking back, before diagnosis, what did you see? I mean, what kind of aspects did your boyfriend see? I mean, what did you kind of see in terms of your neurodiversity pre-diagnosis?
Yeah. Well, I found it really hard to. I found it hard in school. I wasn't necessarily bad student, or I got average grades, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, which is another thing that I think when people do go to see a psychiatrist, a lot of a big thing is that, I guess, a stigma around ADHD, or misconception, I should say, is that they're bad in school and they get bad grades, which is just not true, or at least in my case anyway. So I was pretty all right in school. I found it very hard to focus on things that I wasn't interested in, which I know is an ADHD symptom, but it can also be seen as just being normal, because a lot of ADHD symptoms, a lot of people experience them. It's just at what level do you experience them? That's what causes the diagnosis. So yeah, because as a kid I didn't really know much about it. I kind of just thought it was normal. And even when my mum went to see the psychiatrist to kind of, give her experience as my mum, she was like, oh, I thought that was just Keira being Keira. I didn't realize it was anything different. So that was really interesting to hear that, like, when I did more research about it, it's like, wow, okay, that's a symptom. I thought that was normal. I thought everyone felt that way. So I didn't know any different. So yeah.
Yeah, because I guess it was your normal, wasn't it? Really,
I didn't know anything.
And I guess there is a lot of misinformation, still around ADHD and the presentation, and I mean, it's not my specialist area, but from my understanding, similarly to ASD, I think the presentation can be different in females. Females tend to mask much better than males. And of course ADHD, there's a whole spectrum. I mean, ADHD is a diagnosis, but everybody with ADHD is an individual and experiences the world through their own kind of individual lens. So school wasn't particularly a struggle. It was more things that you were kind of not interested in that you struggled to connect with, but things you were interested in were fine. Your grades were fine. There wasn't massive obvious difficulties in concentration.
I mean, I definitely lent towards more creative fields and classes. University was a big struggle for me, because the first year of university I wasn't, I don't think I was diagnosed, or I may have been diagnosed and not told the university because I didn't realize there was anything in place for me. But I found that really difficult, to the point where I've dropped out, just because I can't, it's quite hard for me to stick to the subjects and do the coursework and everything like that. And I just wasn't interested in it. And that's a really big thing for people with ADHD. If they're not interested in it, their brain just can't concentrate. It's not being lazy. It's not lack of trying. It's you physically can't concentrate on it. Like you want to, but you can't. And the same can be said in high school. I did my year 12 during COVID 2020. So I had to do a lot of self-learning, a lot of, motivating myself to get out of bed. I was actually pretty good for the first few months. And then the second and third lockdown came and I just lost all motivation. And I struggled a lot to try to self-motivate. And it's not that I didn't want to, it's just that I couldn't. And there wasn't any support in place for me at the time, in terms of my ADHD or additional help. But yeah, that was very difficult. And I know with myself, I need change. I get very bored very easily. So I can't do the same thing over and over again. And that's very prevalent in my work. I've had probably just over 10 part-time jobs, just because I do it for a few months and leave just because I get bored. Like I will give up shifts. I will not want to work. So it's taken some time to actually find something that I really love. And acting, for me, I've wanted to act since I was a little kid, and I don't know why that stuck, but that's been the one thing that's stuck with me over the past few years, that I continuously do and I love.
Yeah. And as you say, boredom is, I mean, that's a kind of classic ADHD symptom, isn't it? Boredom is like kryptonite, isn't it, for people with ADHD? Because, you know, your mind wants the stimulation, really. You know, I think this is why often with people with ADHD and having different tasks that they can move between, you know, it is easier than just trying to really, really kind of drill down and concentrate on something that they're not really finding particularly that interesting. I mean, the last guest we had on in episode 1 was an entrepreneur, I think, from memory, and you know, was talking about, you know, ADHD being their superpower in terms of creativity. And can you say a little bit more? I mean, how their ADHD and your creativity kind of blend? Because I'm guessing there's probably some advantages there.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like, I have sounded quite pessimistic towards my ADHD today, but there are a lot of good things about it.
yeah,
A lot of people think that it's a deficit in attention, but it's just an irregulation.
yeah,
So it's not that we don't have enough dopamine to keep us like attentive. It's we can't regulate it. We need, like, for example, I'm very good at picking things up quickly. So I will see someone doing something and I will pick it up and do it for 3 days straight, and it will be exactly how I envisioned. I A few months ago, I got inspired by something I saw on TikTok, and I decided to make an entire ball gown out of a doona cover because
yeah,
I don't know why,
yeah,
but I did it for 3 or 4 days straight. I woke up, I made this ball gown, I
yeah,
went to sleep, made it again, and I don't know how I did it, but it turned out really well. So I feel like I personally am quite good at picking things up like that, and
yeah,
I think it's I have I feel like hyper focus is another. It's a negative and a positive.
yeah,
I think it's great once you get into you know you're hyper focusing on a task. You can do it for hours and get so much stuff done.
yeah,
But then it's also the case of you hyper focusing on something that isn't necessarily productive, and that kind of
yeah.
gets in the way of it sometimes. So yeah, there's ups and downs to it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like anything, you know, there are positives, there are negatives, but the hyper focus, yeah, I mean, I absolutely hear that. You know, I guess it can be negative. I mean, some people that with ADHD, you know, hyper focus, and maybe they'll be so focused on what they're doing, they'll be so productive and so, but maybe they'll forget to eat, or maybe they'll forget to drink, you know. But yeah, but the hyper focus, I guess, can be a real strength, you know, in terms of, you know, completing a task and being inspired and really kind of riding, you know, that energy, like with the gown you were talking about. I mean, that I think can be a real strength, you know, of the kind of neurodiverse brain, really. And in terms of your acting, I mean, this might be too difficult one for you to answer, but how does the hyper focus come in when you're kind of playing a character? Because I'm guessing that must probably help a lot. You can really, I don't know, I don't put words in your mouth. I mean, what's it like in terms of your acting?
It definitely does help. There are some ups and
Yeah.
downs.
Okay.
I tend to procrastinate a lot, which I think everyone does.
Right.
But sometimes the procrastinating comes to when I need to learn lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I find it quite hard to learn the lines. But once I learn them, I'm good. I replay them in my head daily.
Yeah.
But the hyper focus definitely comes when I see a role that I'm really interested in or
Yeah.
that I really want. Because as I said before, people with ADHD tend to focus a lot more on things that they're interested in.
Yeah, for
So as
sure.
soon as I find a role that I'm really interested in or I really like, that's when I buckle down and my brain sort of focuses on it. I research it. I do, research on the people producing it and all of that.
Yeah.
And that's really good. So that's kind of a superpower, I guess, with
Yeah.
ADHD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just for our listeners, and again, this is just maybe difficult for you to answer, but can you give our listeners an idea of what it's like, what ADHD brain is like? Well, what is it like for you cognitively? I know that's maybe a little bit abstract, but can you give our listeners a feel of what, the neurodiverse brain and how your brain works, basically?
Well, for me specifically, it's either super busy and
Yeah.
running at 100 miles an hour,
Yeah.
or there's nothing going on. And
Okay.
that's the inattentive part.
Yeah.
So annoyingly, the I have hyperactivity in my brain. The million thoughts comes right before I'm trying to sleep. And
Yeah.
I find it quite hard to get to sleep because my
Yeah.
brain is like, oh, I need to do this. Oh, I need to do this. Oh, I forgot to text this person. I forgot to do this. I forgot to do that.
Yeah.
And that's one tip that I have for anyone with ADHD or just got diagnosed is I use the reminders app on my phone. And anytime I think of something I need to remember, I add a reminder to my phone so I can get it out of my brain and
Yeah.
onto something else. Because if I know I have to remember something, I won't be able to focus on anything else.
Yeah.
And I've got a calendar in my room so I can get all of my appointments and stuff out of my head, and I just have a visual calendar there. I also set alarms religiously.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I have to, for example, leave at 2:30 for something, I will set an alarm for 1:30. So that gives me an hour to kind of get in the mindset of, okay, you need to start getting ready. You need to eat something. You need to leave.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't have those alarms, I'd have time blindness and I would just
Yeah.
forget that I have to do something. And then it will be 2 minutes before I have to leave and I'm scoffing down food and
Yeah.
it'll be a challenge. So those are a few things that I've kind of developed to help me specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, and the time blindness is also something that is quite common, isn't it, with ADHD? Thinking, people with ADHD feeling they got more time perhaps than they have. I mean, all of the strategies, I guess, that you use must be really helpful. I mean, the externalizing getting things out of your mind and putting them, into the reminder app or, putting them on the calendar. I mean, all that is really good. I think all of that is really good for people with ADHD, but I honestly think all of that is really good for anyone, really. Getting it out of here and putting it somewhere
Yeah.
external is good, But with the strategies that you've developed, did they come pre-diagnosis or have they come after diagnosis?
Most of them were pre-diagnosis, but
Okay.
post-diagnosis, I have a reason for them, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like I
Okay.
have a reason for why they help me.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be able to survive without these things. And I know that's because I struggle with certain symptoms and stuff.
Yeah.
Because pre-diagnosis, because I got diagnosed so late, I thought it was just normal. I thought, I get very overwhelmed very easily. That's just who I am.
Yeah.
It's like you need that additional support.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there are things as well. The more I research, the more I understand the ADHD, the more I can kind of help myself through it. And then that's also where therapy comes into place as well, because they're experts. They deal with this on a daily basis. They can
Yeah.
also use strategies. So it's I think the best thing that someone who gets diagnosed can do is research so they understand their brain. That was really helpful for me because it kind of validated my feelings, it validated my struggles. And then you can figure out some strategies that will help you specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And there's some really good information now about ADHD out there. I think in recent years, ADHD has become a bit more talked about. Neurodiversity generally, I think, is more of a conversation now, which is really, really good. So that, and I guess getting the diagnosis just normalizes it, really. I mean, ADHD is a very common condition, isn't it? So I guess you get the diagnosis. And I think this is often the case with people with ADHD. And often the case that they get diagnosed late. I mean, this unfortunately is something really, really common. But the diagnosis comes and it's like an epiphany. I guess there's a complete understanding of a neurodiverse brain, and then there's an ongoing research in terms of understanding what the brain is doing, and then finding strategies. And also, I have to say, people that are diagnosed late with ADHD often have a whole host of coping strategies because they've just developed these over their life. I mean, that also I think is not uncommon. I mean, in terms of the kind of psychologist, how has that helped? Could you say a little bit more about that and kind of the work that you've done, as much as you're happy to talk about, obviously?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think the main thing for me is like I'm still struggling with it now, but it's kind of I needed help to validate the diagnosis because I had imposter syndrome when I got diagnosed. I was like, oh, maybe I just told him the right things. Maybe I was
Yeah,
lying. Maybe he might not be as good as all the rest. Like major
yeah,
imposter syndrome. It's all silly
yeah,
talk. So I think the therapist was one of the first people that actually said, "You do have ADHD. Let's talk about it." And this is another reason why I don't really tell people that I have ADHD. I think if I've got some people that know me listening will probably be surprised by the
mm,
fact that I have it. Because I don't tell people because I am kind of scared of the view that people have on mental health nowadays. Like it's definitely a lot better than what it was a few years ago, but I think some people may think, this is probably my imposter syndrome, but she's just doing it for attention. She hasn't been diagnosed, like blah blah blah.
yeah,
So I think that's why I don't open up about it, which is quite sad.
mm,
But there are some people. I think there's a there's some people out there that do think that it's an attention seeking thing or don't know enough about it, and just because I was
mm,
diagnosed late, like it means that I can't have it and stuff like that. So
mm.
yeah, that's been a bit of a struggle recently, that I'm still trying to work on.
Yeah, and it does make it really difficult, I think, and I'm really resonating with what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, discussions around mental health have got better. I mean, over my life. I mean, when I was young, there was no discussion really. So I mean, things have changed and things are improving. But I have to be honest. I mean, there is a long way to go, isn't there? I mean, things like there's still so much stigma. And personal opinion. I think ADHD really. I think that there's often so much misconception about it, so much stigma. I mean, you talk about attention seeking. I mean, that is something that I've heard. People really, really don't. I mean, I have to choose my words carefully, but often people comment on these things without any understanding, really, of what it is, and it leaves people in a position where they don't want to open up about it because of all the misperceptions. And I guess this is what you're saying here, isn't it? It stopped you from opening up, really. You've had to kind of keep it in.
Yeah, definitely. And it,
Yeah.
it still happens now. But there's been times where when I do tell people I have ADHD, they will say things like, "Oh, I think I have it too. I get distracted very easily." And it's like, yes, I
Mm,
understand that. If you feel that way, go see a psychiatrist. But
yes.
I think when people say things like, oh, I think I'm the same. I get distracted a little bit, or I'm super hyperactive and stuff
Yeah.
like that. It kind of invalidates the experience of someone with ADHD.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, excluding people that actually want to see a psychiatrist and stuff like that. But I
Mm,
think it's the people that you know say things like, "Oh, I'm so OCD. I have to be clean all the time." It's stuff like that. I think
yeah.
is another thing that is negatively impacting the uh, people with ADHD and other disorders like OCD and things like that. I think that's also another reason why I don't open up very much, because I don't want people to think that I've self-diagnosed,
Yeah.
which I think is very prevalent now, especially due to TikTok. There are a lot of videos going around on TikTok where people give out symptoms of ADHD, but as we know, a lot of symptoms of ADHD are common amongst neurotypical
For
people.
sure. Yeah.
So there are a lot of neurotypical people thinking because they have a few ADHD symptoms that
Mm,
they've definitely got it, and then they'll go around saying that they have ADHD, because a lot of people don't know that ADHD is hereditary, and I don't know how many symptoms, but a few symptoms have to show up in at least 3 areas of your life. So whether
mm,
that be school, work, or at home. So there are so many different aspects to getting diagnosed that people aren't aware of. And I think that's
yeah.
causing a big, there's a lot of misinformation going around, I guess. And impacting, and I feel a touch invalidated as someone with ADHD when those sort of things go around.
Yeah, I mean, I really hear that. I mean, it's so. I mean, with the OCD comment, just picking up on it, that is so common, isn't it? People say, "Oh, I like a clean house. I must have OCD," and it does. You know, I mean, just looking at OCD, I mean, I get, of course, there's the whole spectrum, you know, of OCD, but people, you know, really kind of down the spectrum with. I mean, OCD can be incredibly difficult. People find it really difficult to live their lives, and yeah, so I mean, I guess it is just a reinforcement of the misperception, really. And people that, you know, actually have the condition, have the neurodiverse brain, just feel completely invalidated by it, really. And I guess even when you're opening up and someone is saying, "Oh, I think I've got it because I can't concentrate," I mean, that invalidates you in the moment, really. I mean, you're not heard, you're not. So when you have talked about it, people won't really ask follow-up questions. They won't particularly be interested in finding out more. Has that been your experience? I know you haven't opened up much about it.
Well, I think it goes one or two ways. It goes either, or actually, I've had a few different ways. You know, I do get the comment of like, "Oh, I think I have it too," which, like, don't get me wrong. If you think you have it as well, go see your GP. Go
Sure.
see a psychiatrist. It's just the self-diagnosing I don't personally
Yeah.
agree with. But I've also had people say like, "Oh, you're just doing it for attention. The psychiatrist will tell you anything you want to hear." I've had someone say that to me, um, which is kind of the other end of the spectrum. And then
Yeah,
there's just
that's
a lot of,
awful. Yeah, sorry to
yeah,
jump in, but yeah,
yeah, it wasn't a great experience. And then it's also just people not knowing enough about it. And I love it when people ask about it because it does validate what I'm feeling. It makes me feel like I'm educating people about it, which I
yeah,
ultimately want people to learn more about ADHD because of all the misconceptions. So that's probably the best case scenario is, you know, asking about it, how can you help, validating the person,
yeah.
and yeah, don't kind of, you know, we're just like everyone else. We just need a little bit of help in other situations. So I think, yeah, just going at it with a positive attitude, I guess, and an open mind and willingness to learn about it.
Yeah, I mean, the willingness to learn, I think, is key. You know,
Mm.
and yeah, I mean, we live in a kind of neurotypical society. But that being said, I mean, neurodiversity is it's so common in so many different kind of manifestations. I mean, I work a lot with kind of highly sensitive people, and even that now is coming into, you know, the kind of under a neurodiversity umbrella, and I think that is really, really good. I mean, what was it? I mean, what was it like for your family? I mean, if it's okay to ask that, when you got the diagnosis, how, what was the kind of feedback from family? If it's okay to ask that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
uh, I've got a weird. There are a few different mindsets in my family, but you know, when I was talking to my mum about it before I got diagnosed, I was kind of telling her about it because as I said, I didn't really get raised in a household that knew much about it, just
yeah,
because it wasn't, I guess, as talked about or as common back then.
sure, sure.
Um, and so when I told mum, she was like, okay. But I was kind of telling her more about it. Then, you know, when we went to the psychiatrist together, it kind of opened her eyes a little bit. And she
Mm.
was like, wait, I thought that was just Keira being Keira. I didn't know that was
Well,
symptoms.
which is true,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah,
But she didn't realize that they were ADHD symptoms. But
yeah,
because, you know, I have dealt with this my entire life, it is just me.
yeah,
But there's a reason that I do specific things and stuff like that.
yeah,
And I think, I mean, that's why I'm not on medication at the moment, because, you know, I've been undiagnosed with ADHD for like 18, 19 years of my life,
yeah,
that I don't feel like I necessarily need to change that right now. You know, you know, may start taking medication once if I go back to uni because, you know, that's when you really need to focus and
yeah, sure.
stuff like that. But I've dealt with it for years of all of my life. I don't really feel like it's necessary to take medication because I've kind of got my own coping strategies. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the family experience. It was a lot of learning. It was learning for all of us.
Yeah.
And there's a long way to go, but we've definitely made progress, and yeah, it's been good.
And yeah, and with the medication, yeah, I mean, it's so much a personal choice, isn't it? I mean, some people, take medication for sorts of things, mental health wise, other people don't. And so I guess what I hear you saying is, you've developed your whole life, you've developed coping strategies, and you've kind of managed the condition, pre-diagnosis for years, really. So there's no need really at this point to take medication because your coping strategies support you, really.
Definitely, yeah. And I think medication is amazing, and I'm very grateful that we have that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think if you have ADHD and you want to take medication, you go for it. It's such a good coping mechanism, or probably not the right word, but it's such a good way to help your brain and
Yeah.
alleviate some of those symptoms. But for me personally, I don't feel like it's quite necessary at the moment. So that's just a personal choice for me. But I think maybe in the future, if I go back to school, or if I need to focus on specific things, I might look into it a bit more.
Yeah. I mean, could I ask you, you've already talked about a few kind of coping strategies, but could I maybe just expand that and ask you maybe what else has helped you over the years? I mean, what other strategies do you use?
Well, in terms of studying, if I think back about me when I was in uni, I found that I can't leave things half done,
Yeah.
which is funny because a lot of my hobbies I leave half done. Like I've got a
Okay.
lot of half projects in my wardrobe hiding right now. But in terms of assignments and stuff, once I start, I need to finish it, which
Yeah.
can be very overwhelming. But ultimately, that was best for my learning capabilities and
Yeah.
how I found assignments, because I tended to. I felt like if I stopped, I wouldn't be able to get the motivation to start again.
Yeah. Sure. Get that. Yeah.
A lot of my assignments, I would, so if it was due in a week, or if it was due in 2 weeks, I would pretend it was due in a week. So because I would procrastinate up until that week,
Yeah.
but I tricked my brain into thinking I had less time than I did. So I always submit my assignments early. So it's kind of, manipulating yourself. That's kind
Yeah.
of what I
Yeah.
I also listened to music while I was studying, but not music with lyrics, because that would distract me.
Yeah.
And listen to kind of white noise sort of music.
Yeah. Right.
There's a lot of if you just look up ADHD music on YouTube, you'll see a lot of those sort of things, and you just kind of find one that you connect to. And there was one that I would just listen to all the time, and it just kind of calmed my brain down.
Yeah.
Another thing is, if I have to watch a bunch of lectures, I have something to fiddle with my hands. Like right now, I'm fiddling on a slinky,
Yeah.
just because it helps me focus. It gives my body
Yeah.
something to do, because I've got so much kind of hyperactivity in my
Yeah.
brain,
Sure.
body.
Yeah.
So that was another sort of coping strategy that really helped me. But just staying organized and trying to alleviate a lot of pressure on your brain, a lot of
Yeah.
stuff that your brain is trying to remember. I always found that a good thing that kind of calmed my brain was cleaning, because I felt like I was cleaning my brain. If I
Yeah.
was
Interesting.
working or living in a cluttered area, I need to clean it, because then it kind of felt like I was cleaning everything. So that really helped as well, just having a clean area, less distractions as well. So that's kind of a thing that I would do to kind of, if I was going through kind of a sensory overload, I would
Yeah.
just take some time, clean up, put some
Yeah.
music on, headphones in, just turn off for a while, and then
Yeah.
go back at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I, I mean, all of these are really, really good coping strategies. I think with people with ADHD, the shift of having split attention helps, doesn't it? I mean, that's why I'm guessing the music helps, because it's just your mind's concentrating on two things really. And and I guess the stimming, I mean, I do it myself. When I I have a pen and I kind of play around with it. So I mean, I guess that really, really helps, because it's giving your body something to do, isn't it? And again, I guess it's kind of a split of attention, really. You're kind of splitting your attention, a wee bit. So you have developed so many coping strategies. I mean, another one is that I've read about is exercise. I mean, physical exercise is meant to be really, really great for ADHD. I don't know whether you found that.
Yeah, I've heard a
Yeah.
lot of things about it. But that is the one thing that I can't get my butt off the couch to do.
Okay.
That's a personal thing though. I
Yeah.
hate exercise, but it is very good for people with ADHD. And I did find that whenever I, did go out for a walk or a run, or, hung out with friends and just walked around, it
Yeah.
did help clear my mind. But I just hate exercise so much that I don't do it enough.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I mean, the other coping strategies are clearly working enough for you. I mean, I know we're kind of running out of time, but I just wanted to ask you about the overwhelm, because that is also really common, isn't it, with ADHD? I mean, there's a whole school of thought. I don't know if have you ever read the book by Gabor Mate about ADHD?
No, I
Yeah,
haven't.
I'll maybe send you a link to it. I mean, I think it's a really, really good book, and he, he talks about overwhelm, and he talks about people with ADHD, having a deep sensitivity, really. And I guess what comes with a deep sensitivity is possibility for overwhelm. And I just wonder, could you explain to our listeners a little bit around what it feels like when you get overwhelmed, when there's sensory overwhelm or task overwhelm?
Yeah, there are a few different types, I guess, for me, personally, that I've experienced. I guess the most obvious one would be kind of a sensory overload, whether that be you be in a really busy shopping center
Yeah,
or loud places, or, one thing for me was like, catching public transport, or flights and stuff, because you not
yeah,
only have a bunch of people around you, but you also have to focus on, okay, when's this one coming? This train is in 20 minutes, but it takes me 15 minutes to walk there.
yeah,
I only have 5 minutes to spare, stuff like that. That's why I don't take public transport anymore, because it's just too much for me. I
yeah,
drive everywhere.
yeah,
And because of acting, I'm always required in the city. I just drive in the city. Um, so that's what really got to me, was and then that kind of also leads into the other sort of overload or overwhelming feeling that I get, is when I have too much going on in my brain. So if I have to think
yeah,
about too much, if I have a bunch of appointments or a bunch of things to do, I get very overwhelmed very easily.
yeah,
And that's where things like to-do lists and stuff come into play. But
yeah,
those both for me kind of are worse when I'm doing things like public transport, because I'm not only thinking about, oh my God, there are 5 million people around me. I have nowhere to sit. It's hot. It's stuffy. I don't know where I am. I've never been to this place before.
yeah,
But I'm also thinking, oh my God, this train is in 2 minutes. What if I don't make it? When's the next one? And then if plans change, that's a whole nother
yeah,
stress. So I run through every single scenario in my head.
yeah,
If I have to be somewhere, I will run through it. I'll be like, okay, I need to be in my car by this time so I can get to the place by this time, then I can catch this train at this time. And if I miss one of those steps, my whole plan unravels.
yes,
And it's unbelievably overwhelming. And that
mm,
at that point, you just kind of want to shut down and not go,
yeah,
or not do what you want to do.
yeah.
So that is a very big struggle as well.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be really resonated by other people with ADHD, and other conditions. I mean, highly sensitive people feel this as well, and I guess when you're in those situations, I guess your mind is trying to problem solve. I mean, I'm just thinking about a last minute change of plan, and the ADHD mind. And correct me if this is wrong, but I'm guessing your mind starts to problem solve. So I guess it's trying to do you a favor, but in a really busy way. Lots and lots of thoughts coming really, really quickly.
Yeah, like people with ADHD are amazing at problem solving, which
Yeah,
makes such a good employee to have. They're
yeah,
great at problem solving. However, it can get overwhelming, especially for me specifically. I find it very difficult to, because you've kind of like imagined your whole day out. You've planned your entire day. I've gone through it mentally, and then as soon as something changes, it's like, oh God, I've need to start all over again, and it's
yeah,
very overwhelming. Which I know is a symptom of ASD, is
yeah.
planning everything
True.
out,
Yeah.
being overwhelmed with with plans changing and stuff like
Mm.
that. And I guess so many mental illnesses, they kind of go hand in hand. Like I found out a few months ago that ADHD is more common with a comorbidity than alone. So more people have ADHD with another disorder rather than ADHD alone. So I guess to add on top of the ADHD, you could also have a comorbidity, but
yeah, true. Yeah, I mean, there's often a comorbidity with ASD and ADHD. Yeah, I mean, just to name one. Yeah, and I guess it is called disorder, but I don't know. I always struggle with that word. I mean, honestly, I mean, because these things are not disorder. These things are, I mean, these things are just diversity. And I guess, why is ADHD still now being naturally selected? It's being naturally selected because I guess in a hunter-gatherer society, it's really useful, isn't it? I mean, goodness me, the person, in that kind of, I mean, and also now, there are elements, but in that kind of primal society, I mean, the person with ADHD would be problem solving, they would have energy, they would have hyper focus, such a benefit to the group, which I guess is why it's still being naturally selected. There are lots of benefits, to it. We kind of need to finish there. Is there anything else that you would like to say that I've not given you the opportunity to?
No, not really. I think we've covered most things. I just think, if you're questioning if you might have ADHD, go see a psychiatrist, get a diagnosis, do some research, and even if you don't think you have ADHD, just do some research, learn about it so you can understand everyone else.
Brilliant. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on, Keira. It's just going to be a really, really interesting show for our listeners and such an important subject. So I'm really glad we've come back to it. And nice to see you again.
You too. Thanks for having me.